going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets, powered by FTN. I'm your host, Chris Meaney. Thanks, as always, for taking the time to hang out. Episode 19 of Mean Streets, the Willie Reed, Sam Cassell, Lenny Wilkentine, Turkaloo episode. You know where I'm going with this? Yes, finally, we have turned the page from the NFL to the NBA. I told you it was coming. I'm not going to leave you hanging. I know it's a big weekend for a lot of people. Semi-final matchups, round 2 in fantasy football lands. Still going to talk some football on the show. It's going to happen. I mean, football never goes away. It's football all the time. Won't leave you hanging. We'll have a football episode this weekend. Some picks, some props, some DFS plays. Take your starter sit questions. Run through the news, notes, and injuries, and help you get set to get into the finals and take home a ship. That's what it's all about. But the NBA season is just days away, and I wanted to preview so many great FTN minds, as I said several times on this show. A lot of beauties who know the game of basketball inside and out, but I think I have two of the best to start us off here, and it's no disrespect to anybody else. Not named Steph, a.k.a. Big Money Play. And then we have Zac Graham, a.k.a. Quisenberg DFS, the co-host of Live with Fast Eddie Fear. Took down 25K opening night of the preseason. Remember when I talked about that last week? That's right. I have him on this show to run through the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference. Going to go through team by team, highlight who we like, who we don't, some team implied totals, maybe some MVP, Rookie of the Year odds as well. It's all happening here on Mean Streets, and I couldn't be happier. But I won't lie to you guys. If you're on the East Coast, you know the Northeastern has kind of run through the East Coast, and I was without power for a little bit, and I lost the intro to the Western Conference preview. The East is coming. It's going to happen. It's around the corner. You'll see it. But I lost the preview for the Western Conference preview, the preview of the preview, the intro, and I wanted to give these guys a proper intro. I mean, Zach does some phenomenal work at FTN. He's a sharp DFS mind. Steph is as well, and you know he's the VP of marketing and partnership over at FTN. He's the director of NBA advanced stats for FTN. His baby, the advanced DVP, defense versus position. So I wanted to give these guys a proper intro, and luckily, really, we just missed the intro. As you'll see, right now, if you're watching on our YouTube page, I'm rocking the Mavs tee, so wasn't being a homer. We began each preview alphabetical, so Dallas just happens to be first, okay? First in my heart, first for you on this show. So running through team by team, again, just wanted to give them a proper intro. The East is coming. If you're watching, please like, subscribe to our FTN YouTube page. If you have any questions, a keeper league question, who to target in drafts, leave it. Leave it in the comment section. Certainly I'll get to it. And like I said, at Quisenberg DFS, at Big Money Play, advanced DVP tool, Kyler Murray's projections has been on this show before, absolute stud. Ownership projections, NBA split tool, Fast Eddie's daily rankings, the live stream, as I mentioned, with Quisenberg DFS, the daily articles, and the exposures. Who these guys are playing in daily, how much exposure they'll have, Discord chats. It's all there in one package, $49.99 per month, the NBA Platinum monthly package. Subs are having success already, and the season hasn't even started. So without further ado, let's throw to the studs, picking it up right here with the Dallas Mavericks, and you'll see the smile on my face as I ask the guys, are the Mavs a lock to make the playoffs? What do they say? Enjoy. Can they take another step forward? Do you like their because they didn't do a whole lot. I mean, a couple draft picks, but they didn't really bring in that big name, which was rumored what Mark Cuban wanted to do. He wanted to bring a big name in. Of course, he always wants to bring in a big name. Kristaps Porzingis would be the key, I think, to this team. But do you think that they can take another step forward? And are they a lock to make the playoffs?
You know, Chris, this is the first time that we've been on together. We've really interacted, in person through the screen. But I hope that you're going to like me a little bit more because I am high on the Mavericks this year, my
Oh,
man.
baby.
Luka is my MVP pick. Apparently that's the chalk. Apparently he's the favorite to win, but I think, I mean, this guy, and I don't know if it's a hot take or not. I don't know why more people aren't talking about Luka having the ceiling of being the greatest player of all time. He had the greatest age 20 season we've ever seen a basketball player have. If I'm missing something, somebody tag me on Twitter, in the FTN Discord, or in the comments here. But this guy is amazing, and I love watching him play. You touched on Kristaps Porzingis, going to be out, I think, till late January, early February. But if he can stay healthy the rest of the season as he builds back to full health, the ceiling of this team to me is probably getting into the top 4 seeds in the West. I'm not sure they get much past the 4, but this team, I think, was only 4 games out as a 7 seed last year, 4 games out of the 3 seed. So they're right there. They're a lot closer than I think a lot of people think. And you mentioned, I love the Steph Curry for Josh Richardson trade. I think it gives them a little bit better defensive flexibility on the wing. Jay Rich, maybe not the same offensive talent that Seth Curry is, certainly from deep, but he's very capable, and I love that deal for him. They get Dwight Powell coming back from the Achilles, and another prediction we mentioned on the Eastern Conference show that Steph and I were on the FTN NBA podcast with Adam Pfeiffer and Joe Metz, and my coach of the year pick was Rick Carlisle. Man, I think he gets these guys going. He consistently does more with what he has than most people expect. So I'm a big fan of Coach Carlisle. He hasn't won a Coach of the Year award since his first year coaching, 2002 with Detroit. Jerry Stackhouse, the leading scorer on that team. It's long overdue for NBA champion head coach Rick Carlisle.
Yeah, I know. And when people look at that championship roster, I feel like more people give Dwayne Casey the respect of switching to zone against the Heat. I mean, he did a great job. He earned himself a head coaching job when he went to Toronto. I love Dwayne Casey, but yeah, I agree. I don't think Carlisle gets that sort of respect, but he is one of the better coaches in the NBA. Yeah, Luka, I mean, 4-1. Giannis, I think is it part of it because the NBA typically doesn't just hammer like Giannis again MVP, Giannis again MVP, and Kristaps being out until maybe January, February, and who knows? That's probably just best case scenario, Steph. That will probably help his MVP case as well.
Yeah, those are the 2 reasons. That's exactly it. The Giannis thing is not overblown. That's exactly the reason why.
Because I thought LeBron should have got it again a few years ago.
I mean, the NBA loves to kind of pass the torch to the next great superstar, and that they do that through their MVP. So we kind of saw, Kobe to LeBron, LeBron to Kevin Durant, then we saw Durant to Giannis. I'm sure there was someone in between. I'm forgetting, but it's Luka's time. As Zach said, he had the greatest age 20 season of all time. The man is incredible. I mean, he was my pick for MVP. He's the favorite. That's not like a hot take at all. Those are the 2 main reasons why. One point I want to touch on, I'm a little worried about the Mavs, but less so because of Rick Carlisle. He is maybe the best coach in the NBA. Without KP, that is a huge piece missing, and the West is so competitive. There's some risk the Mavs don't make the playoffs. I think Rick Carlisle is the type of coach that overcomes that, and he puts the right pieces in place, and they'll be totally fine, and they'll be a playoff team in the West. And Luka will get his MVP, and Chris Meaney will be happy, and the world will go on.
Yeah, I will be happy. Yeah, I mean, I love watching the guy play. I mean, he really does put the team on the back. That's when I ask that question a lot, because I feel like I'm looking at projections all over. I hear people talking NBA, and everybody loves the Mavs, but everybody loves Luka. But I mean, he has to, and he is a superstar, but he has to absolutely ball out for this team, I think, I don't even know if they're top 5, but to just sniff top 5 in the West.
And that's why the Josh Richardson trade is so important. Is he's a better ball handler than Seth Curry, and Curry is arguably the better offensive player because of his shooting prowess. Josh Richardson is a better defender, and I would say he's a better facilitator than Seth Curry. They need that secondary ball handler to play alongside Luka, especially with KP out, just to take some pressure off of him. There's risk, and it's scary that KP is not going to be there for the first month of the year. But yeah, just repeating myself, I think they'll be fine. I think Rick Carlisle will find the way to make the pieces work.
I had to join 3 dynasty leagues just so I can get Luka last year. I was like, I need this guy in a dynasty league. So that's the homer in me right there. Let's move along. Denver Nuggets 44.5, 46 and 27 last year, third in the conference, 5th offensive rating, 16th defensively, 29th in pace. This is a good team. This is a good basketball team. They can make some noise. They brought in JaMychal Green. Didn't really lose a whole lot there. What do you make of this team, Zach, in Denver?
I mean, I think we'll get to dark horse picks later, but I'll go ahead and spoil my pick. I think this is the dark horse to come out of the West. I'm not putting any of my money on that right now, partially because I'm in Texas. I'm not legally allowed to sports bet, but I just think this, again, continuity. We talked about it with some of the teams out east. It holds true here. The short off season, not a lot of roster turnover here, and one of the most exciting teams from the bubble playoff is the Denver Nuggets, right? Multiple 3-1 comebacks in playoff series, pretty much on the back of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, and those two guys are obviously back and ready to go. They get Will Barton back, who's a great piece, and Mr. Untouchable, apparently, Michael Porter Jr. should take another step. So I think the ceiling for this team is really high, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention my EuroLeague buddy Facundo Campazzo coming over from Real Madrid. When you see him on the play-by-play coming into the game, flip your league pass over to the Denver Nuggets game. One of the better pick and roll players in the world right now, Campazzo. So just another exciting piece for this Denver team.
See, I told you guys when you'd watch this show and listen to this show, you'd be sold already. I'm just like, yeah, I mean, who the heck is that guy? I don't know. I mean, you're following Euroball. I love it. Jamal Murray last year, shout out to the old Canadian kid. Man, he really did. He was very impressive in the bubble. I mean, 30-point games, 40-point game, taking over games, game on the line. What's the ceiling for him, Steph?
So he's actually the favorite, according to Vegas, to win most improved players. Vegas thinks he is going to take that leap into stardom. And I agree. I think Jamal Murray has every skill needed to make that jump. He can shoot off the dribble. He can create his own shot. He can attack the rim. He can be a facilitator. I think he's an improved defender. I don't think he's a good defender, but he's an improved defender. I think that will continue to improve. I agree with Zach here. I think the ceiling for this team is NBA Finals appearance. I think the ceiling for Jamal Murray is all-star, most improved player. I don't think he'll get MVP votes just because he has another MVP candidate on his team. But, the ceiling for Jamal Murray is being a legit, it's the bad example because they're polar opposites to, Jordan and Pippen, but he could be Pippen to Jokic's Jordan, so to speak.
Okay, I like it. All right. Yeah, Denver's an exciting team. They're a good team. And they're another team that I don't feel they get respect. I think throughout the bubble and the playoffs, they started to get that respect, but nobody was thinking that they would beat the Clippers, right? And nobody was giving them the type of respect that I thought that they deserved. On to the Warriors. Oh, go ahead.
I'm really curious to see what happens with Michael Porter Jr. and what his actual ceiling is. I agree with the Nuggets that his ceiling is stardom. If they want to take that huge step forward and potentially be a finals team, I think he needs to make that step this year.
I wondered if they were one piece off, if you guys thought that they were like one player making that big jump apart from Jokic and Murray. And maybe that is Porter Jr. potentially. Yeah. Over to the Warriors. What a bummer, man, Clay. I think we were all bummed. Any NBA fan was certainly, I would say, bummed. If you're not, you're a Warriors hater. That's all it is. I mean, this guy is great on the floor. You want to see him and Steph together. Unfortunately, he's not going to be there. The win total is at 36.5. It was an awful year for the Warriors, to say the least. I think it's second overall pick. Steph Curry played, 5 games last season? And I've already done a couple season-long leagues. I don't do a whole lot of season-long basketball. That has kind of I've gotten away from that over the past couple of years. But I see Steph going pick 10, pick 11, pick 12. We'll start with you, Zach. This is a guy. This is his team, man. I feel like we're going to see old school Steph here, just jacking up a lot of shots.
Yeah, and I think from a fantasy perspective, it starts with Clay, which that hurt my heart, man. I love Klay Thompson on and off the court, and the NBA is better when he's healthy and when Steph is healthy and when the Warriors are a threat. Obviously,
Yeah.
I think we all got to, unless you live in the Bay Area, we all got tired of the super team with Kevin Durant. But now that he's across the country, I kind of want to see this Warriors team full strength again. Can they still threaten every single year to win the title? Before Clay went down, I was thinking they could. Now I think that it's a little bit too far gone for them. But again, from a fantasy perspective, Clay being out is going to just increase Steph Curry's usage. Let's not get too carried away. Andrew Wiggins is going to take some shots. They did bring in Kelly Oubre, which I thought was a really nice move to kind of plug the gap left by Clay. But Steph, if he's going double digits in terms of picks and season long leagues, that's too late.
I have him ranked as a top 5 guy. I just think the usage is going to be there, and the numbers are going to be there every single day, Steph. If he's healthy and he plays, who's the second guy on this team? Is it Wiggins, who could maybe be an underrated asset in fantasy this year?
I actually think it's James Wiseman.
Okay.
I think Wiseman is going to rack up rebounds. I think he's going to be a borderline double-double. I mean, Wiggins is going to get his shots, but he's going to be scoring dependent. I think Wiseman is going to be arguably the second best fantasy producer on this team. It's really close between Oubre, Wiseman, and Draymond Green, so to speak, just because Draymond Green is going to rack up stats in multiple categories. From a DFS perspective, I could see Wiseman becoming the second highest priced Warrior more than I would say Oubre, Wiggins, or Draymond. It's close. It's a bit of a hot take. I just think, they picked him second overall, and I think he's actually the main beneficiary to Clay being out, just because I think we're going to see not a system change in Golden State, but we're going to see them kind of go big way more often than we're used to, and they're going to use that asset. And he is a legit asset. I mean, he's the second overall pick. He's got superstar potential and superstar upside. He can shoot threes. I think he's going to be heavily involved in the Warriors' offense and their plans.
Steph is obviously an MVP candidate. He's 5-1. If the Warriors make the playoffs, Steph has got to be big time in consideration, Zach, doesn't he? I mean, he would be the main reason that they would make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to get up into the top 4 seeds for that to happen.
Okay.
I don't think anybody outside of a top 4 seed. I think Oklahoma City, when Russell Westbrook won it, was the 4 seed. They may have been the 5, but that's really rare regardless. And so I think they get up into the top 4, then he's a top 3 contender for the award. But that's tough in the West this year, man. Even with Steph Curry and Draymond Green and the number 2 pick and all the guys we talked about. But I just wanted to give props to the front office of this team, because you got D'Angelo Russell back when Kevin Durant was leaving. You flipped him into Andrew Wiggins, and I'm not gaga over Andrew Wiggins, but this front office is phenomenal. And I'm not saying that they're light years ahead as their owner might think that they are, but they got a leg up on the average franchise. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. On to the Rockets, 34.5, 44 wins last season, 4th in the conference, 6th offensive rating, 15th defensively, 2nd in pace. We talked at the end of the Eastern Conference show. We really broke down the Russell Westbrook trade. Don't know if Harden is going to be gone from this team, but bring in Wall, Christian Wood, DeMarcus Cousins. This is a really different team, Steph. And if Harden is gone, then it's sort of rebuild. I mean, depending on what pieces they could get, a more of a balanced team potentially. We'll start there. Do you think Harden is on this team all year?
3 weeks ago, I would say no. I think he's going to stay with the team now. I think we're at this point of the year where it's tough to move a piece like James Harden, especially to a contender because that's kind of where he wants to go. He wants to go to the Bucks. He wants to go to the Nets or the Sixers. They talked about the Heat. I mean, those teams are going to have to give up a lot of pieces to get James Harden. It's going to throw off kind of their season, right? It's going to take a while for those pieces to mesh in a shortened season where all these teams have where they have championship aspirations. I find it hard to believe that Harden's going to get traded. I've been pleasantly surprised by the Rockets in the preseason. I think John Wall looks a lot better than I was expecting. We kind of talked about this with Kevin Durant when we were talking about the East, where because John Wall had 18 to 24 months to recover, not just 12 months, maybe that Achilles injury, and he's had 2, isn't affecting him as much as we all thought. Time will tell, especially as the grind of the NBA season goes. I'm sure his minutes will be monitored, or he'll be rested on certain days. But I've been pleasantly surprised by the Rockets, and especially with Boogie Cousins. Boogie Cousins looks good, and he's shooting the ball really, really well. I even though Daryl Morey is not in Houston anymore, I think they have that. There's a similar philosophy where they're going to want to take a ton of threes. They're going to play through James Harden with a lot of ISO ball. If Boogie is able to hit threes consistently, he is a really interesting piece with this team. I think people are a little too low on the Rockets. I get James Harden looked a little fat yesterday, but the man is a bucket getter. The man is one of the top. I don't think this is a hot take, but I'm gonna say he's a top 5, top 7 NBA player. This team has talent. If Wall and Boogie look how they've looked in the preseason consistently through the year, I think this team remains a playoff team.
So I was going to ask you guys if the win total is a little low here at 34.5. I feel like it's slightly low. 3 or 4 years ago, if like Wall and Cousins and Harden we'd be talking about one of the better big threes in the NBA for sure. Harden did look a little big. Quarantine body. I'm sure he'll get into game shape, whatever game shape.
I call it the quarantine 15.
There you go. But yeah, he is one of the better scorers, not in just today's NBA, but I think of all time, one of the better scorers for sure. Do you think that this win total is a little low, Zach? 34.5? Do you think they're a playoff team?
It's a little perplexing to me. I think that's maybe factoring in the chance that Harden gets traded, because if he's on the team, I have a hard time seeing that they're an under 500 team. That seems ridiculous to me. So that kind of still raises my eyebrows a little bit at the chance of a trade, if that's the line we're getting. But as much love as I gave, we've got the trio of Texas teams here. Obviously, the Spurs we'll get to. That's my team. And gave ton of love to Dallas. It's the opposite for the Rockets. Where can I even start? I think they have a big issue with their owner. The entire thing fell apart once he bought the team. And, the guy has a book. I think it's called Shut Up and Listen. That doesn't sound like a good team owner to me, or any sort of team thing at all. So from the top down, I feel bad for Steven Silas, who's coming over from your Mavs, longtime assistant coach. And I think he's going to be a fine head coach. But the fact that he's thrown into this situation with Harden, we talked about keys to the kingdom with guys like Killian Hayes and some others. He had the keys to the Rockets' kingdom on the court and in the front office the last few years, and he's run off Dwight Howard, which that's not super surprising that somebody didn't get along with Dwight Howard. But then, okay, let's bring in Chris Paul, and he runs off Chris Paul. And the problem wasn't Chris Paul. Look what he did in OKC last year. Yeah. So he orchestrates, my buddy Russ is going to come down here, and then we're a year from that trade, and all of a sudden he wants to get out of Houston and get away from Russ. It doesn't make any sense to me. The common denominator here is James Harden, and I'm not going to dismiss his stats or his abilities at all, but the guy is not a leader. And to be honest, I think he's to keep it PG, he's just a jerk. And you can see it with him going to a strip club and Lil Baby's birthday party when he's supposed to be in training camp. Yeah. I don't understand what's going on in Houston. You lose Daryl Morey. That's terrible for the team. You sign Boogie Cousins and John Wall. You trade for John Wall. That's great, But to your point, the key word was a few years ago this would have been fun, and I think this is just going to go off the rails. And I think it's in Houston's best interest to move James Harden. It sucks if you're a Rockets fan. If you're a part of the organization, I feel bad for PJ Tucker, who should have got paid, and now he's going to be on a terrible team that it really only worked for him because of what they were trying to run with D'Antoni and Daryl Morey in the front office. So it's a mess in Houston, and if you can't tell, I'm not too happy with them.
Tell us how you really feel. No, you really bring up a lot of points. I'm already sick of talking about Harden, and it's just been a couple minutes. I've heard, everything that you pretty much alluded to, the birthday, the practice, the strip clubs, Vegas, this and that. I think he's I don't like to use that term cancer in the locker room, but I think he is an issue. I think he's a problem for sure. I do feel bad for Stevens going into that mess. And I agree. I think the best move would be to part ways, but I actually agree with Steph too. I think it's more of an offseason move. I think it could just be a headache all year. Maybe they decide to say, you know what, F it. We will just move on from him and take what we can get and just counter losses that way.
Yeah,
you're right.
Let me go in on one more thing. I'm
Yep.
sorry, Chris, but the fact that he wants to go to all these contenders, like they
Yes.
have the assets to just get, like, do you realize, James, that if you go to a Miami or someplace like that, yeah, you could have a good year or two where your championship window is open, but that team, if you're going to stay there long term, is mortgaging their future to get
Right.
you. So
Yeah.
I again,
yeah,
I'll
like what would
lay
it
off for now,
take? Like Steph, what would it take to get Harden? For if you're the 76ers, you're the Heat. I mean, the Heat have a bunch of pieces, but if you're the 76ers, what does it take to get James Harden?
If it was pre DeMarcus Cousins, he might have to be involved in this trade. I think it's Embiid or Simmons.
Yeah.
I don't think the Sixers would do that anymore. For the Nets, the Nets, I think, had the best package, where it was LeVert, Allen, Dinwiddie, and picks. I think that would have been a really healthy package. I don't think that's happening anymore. For the Heat, I think it has to include Hero. Like, they're not going to trade Bam. They're not going to trade Jimmy. It's got to be Hero. I don't think the Heat have enough to do it, to be honest. I don't see it. Milwaukee would probably have to trade Chris Middleton. I don't think they trade Drew Holiday because they just brought him in. It's tough to see a path to where he's going. Right? I don't see how he can get traded.
You wouldn't like him on the Nets, would you? I mean, you could bring in.
I was actually
pumped back together
when the rumor happened. When I thought it was going to happen, I was pumped about it. I thought, I mean, that team's unguardable. Honestly, with Kyrie, Durant, and James Harden, I don't really care about how dysfunctional that locker room is. Try guarding that team. I
remember the OKC days when Harden was on the bench and it was KD and Westbrook and they were making that run and then Harden was the guy that was traded, and I always thought, wow, I can't believe you traded him for what? Well, who's back? Like, was it Lamb was involved in that?
Kevin Martin.
Kevin Martin, Lamb, the pick that became Steven Adams.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Here we are.
It's a good trade for the Rockets.
Sure. Absolutely. The Clippers, 45.5, 49-23 last year, second in the conference, second offensive rating, fifth defensive rating, top 10 in pace, eighth. They bring in Ibaka, Kawhi. I heard Ibaka say, I'm paraphrasing here. He says, yeah, Kawhi just called me up and said, are you coming? And then that was it. He's there. Nick Batum, old school guy, another guy who touched a lot of categories back in the day. They lose Harrell, they lose Green, and they lose Rivers, Ty Lue, head coach there. I mean, I don't know what we could really say about this Clippers team, Steph. Are they better with Ibaka and Harrell out?
I think so. Ibaka was actually my favorite free agent signing. I think this is a perfect fit for Ibaka. I wanted the Nets to sign Ibaka, for example, because that's because I thought they were going to trade for James Harden. But I think Ibaka is a tremendous fit here. I think he's an improvement over Harrell. He can stretch the floor better. He's a better defender. It just overall, I think he's a better player than Montrezl Harrell, even though I'm a Trez fan. The Clippers are what they are. They're going to be a 1 or a 2 seed, I think, in the West. Their goal is to win a championship. I think they have the ability to do it. Kawhi is amazing. I don't love the Paul George contract, but at the same time, they have to give Paul George that contract. So, it's one of those where, you just have to do it for what they're doing, what they're trying to accomplish, I should say. This team's loaded. They're really good. I want to see Kawhi and Paul George play a little better in the playoffs. I don't think they were great in the bubble. I get the bubble was a bit of a different circumstance, but I was particularly disappointed with Paul George. I think that was an easy person to get on because he didn't shoot the ball well. But both of those players need to play better in the playoffs for them to kind of hit their ceiling, and their ceiling is an NBA champion.
Yeah, Paul George said he owes the Clippers nation a championship for how bad he played, and there's been some rumblings about Doc and a bit of a disconnect there. With Doc gone, do you think that a bit of a disconnect would be an understatement? Do you think that I don't know. I mean, I didn't even really know what to say. I mean, Steph said it. They're a top 2 team in the West. Maybe they're 3. If Denver does go 1, the Lakers 2, whatever, flip flop them, and then the Clippers are there. But do you think that they have the team together to actually be a championship team?
I do. This is actually my pick to win the championship this year.
All right.
And if you could have homerism that's outside of my favorite team, I've followed Kawhi to Toronto and now the Clippers, and I really enjoy watching him play. I am kind of concerned about his leadership qualities. I think in San Antonio, there's obviously 2 decades of established leadership that he was able to thrive under, and not dissimilar situation in Toronto with Kyle Lowry and some of the other veterans that were established on that team, and Nick Nurse being in the Raptors organization for many years. He was obviously able to win another title there. That doesn't exist in the Clippers organization, and I think they're trying to, Steve Ballmer's trying to build towards that, but Kawhi's got to be the one that sets that foundation. And so I'm hoping for his sake and for the Clippers' sake that he's progressed in that area. To y'all's point, they had to sign Paul George, because if you give up however 3 first-round picks and 2 pick swaps for a guy and SGA, could be a budding all-star, you're going to need to keep Paul George around. And so I thought it was a fine signing. People get on Paul George a lot, and rightfully so, but he's still a really, really good player. And to me, the only misstep that the Clippers made this offseason was Marcus Morris. Why are we signing this guy to a 4-year, $64 million deal when he is at best the 3rd best power forward on your team behind Kawhi Leonard and Paul George? Obviously, all 3 of those guys can play at the same time, but that deal made 0 sense to me. And it doesn't just have to do with my hatred for Marcus Morris, as anybody who tunes in to Live with Fast Eddie Beard knows. It's just a bad contract from an NBA perspective.
My 4 years.
Yeah. When Kawhi sits, how do you target this team from a DFS standpoint? I mean, besides from Paul George, Zach?
Yeah, so Paul George, I mean, that's going to open up Lou Williams, right, off the bench. And I think you could even see, we talked about Nick Batum before, right? I don't think Batum has much left in the tank. He might even start a few games this year, but I think Paul George, number 1, Lou Williams off the bench, and then kind of a deeper play, maybe some Terrence Mann at min price this year at some point. We could get some love for.
All right, I like it. From one LA team to another, the Lakers 46.5. Champs, first in the conference, 11th offensive rating, 3rd defensive rating, 11th in pace, 52-19. Man, I just feel like they got better. Are you kidding me? Like, bring in Schroeder, Harrell, Wes Matthews, Marcus Gasol. Steph, this team got better, right? Like,
yeah,
there's no question they got better.
Yeah, they got better. And let's not count out current preseason superstar THT. The man is putting up points. I think he's going to be a rotational player for this Lakers team. I think he's earning it. I think Frank Vogel wants to reward him. But I agree. I think Schroeder is an improvement. I think they're a better team. Yeah, they're the favorites to win the finals, and rightfully so. I can't knock this team in one area. They're loaded. I think people expect Dennis Schroeder to come off the bench. I think he's going to start. He talked about wanting to start with the Lakers. I know he was a trendy pick for 6th man of the year. I don't think he'll qualify. I think he's going to start too many games. I think they're trying to replicate what Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell did with the Clippers with Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell, and I think they'll do it fairly well. This team's really good. Marcus Gasol's kind of veteran presence as like a defensive anchor for his 16 minutes a game he's going to play. I don't think he's going to top over 20. It's going to be in that 16 to 20 minute range. They're just a championship caliber team, the favorites to win it. They're loaded. LeBron's looking to go back to back.
Yeah, I know LeBron wasn't happy with the quick turnaround, but I mean, come on. They brought in a couple nice pieces where he can just chill for a few weeks if he wanted to. He doesn't have to be playing max minutes to be competitive. So why Clippers over Lakers for you? I know, Zach, they're probably super close hand in hand, but what's the difference, do you think?
Yeah, so I really like the again, this is going back to the Clippers, but I think the Serge Ibaka signing is going to make a big impact in a potential matchup between these two teams. You're not going to shut down Anthony Davis, but if you can make it as tough as possible on him to get to his spots and put some pressure on him on the other end, pulling him away from the rim, I think that's a big boost to this team, where I worried more last year about having somebody like Montrezl Harrell having to guard him. But I think with the Lakers, Steph, I think, makes a great point about what they're trying to do with Schroeder and Harrell off the bench. We might see Schroeder start maybe all season, maybe just a portion, but I just think this team they were stagnant at worst. And I think you would have a hard time arguing that they did not get better.
Yeah, I like I said, I think they definitely got better. It's going to be it'll be fun to watch both of these teams. I want to see them in the playoffs go toe to toe. LA, come on, that'd be fantastic. Yep. You like the over 46.5? Is that too high?
I don't know. It's a good number.
It is a good number. I know. It could be just a stay away, but both of these teams could win 50.
If we had a traditional offseason and it was still a 72-game season, I would like the over. Yeah. I'm a little concerned that the Lakers have such a short turnaround time that we'll see, rest days for Anthony Davis and LeBron James. And, in a shortened season at 46.5, 2 losses on 2 LeBron and AD rest days, that could be the difference. So I would actually stay away from that number. I mean, listen, I think they're going to be the 1 seed. And if they're the 1 seed, they should beat that number. There's a little too much uncertainty for me to feel confident about hitting that over.
Zach, how do you feel about Memphis? 30.5 is the win total, 34-39, 9th in the conference last year, 6th in pace. Not a great offensive team, dealt with a lot of injuries last season. What do you make of this squad?
I think they're maybe going to be a casualty of being in a tough Western Conference. They have a lot of pieces that I like. Obviously, John Morant would be the first on everybody's list, but can Jaren Jackson Jr. Come back and take a step this year? Dylan Brooks, can he be more efficient from outside? Volume shooter. And they've got a couple other pieces. I like former Spur Kyle Anderson just kind of as a rotation piece. They've got a lot of guys that can do things, right? But I just don't know if it's enough to even get over that 30.5 number this year. Again, short turnaround time. They were in the bubble. They've got pieces. They're scrappy, but it's tough for me to see them really making noise out west.
Yeah, there's just too many elite teams up at the top for them to really make some noise. But Steph Morant he's a heck of a player. I think he could take a big leap forward. And I think in 3 or 4 years, we're talking about him being not one of the best, but certainly maybe a top 10, top 15 player in the NBA. I don't think that's a stretch.
Yeah, I mean, his ceiling is a perennial MVP candidate, and that's what the Grizzlies want. And he has that potential. He's one of the most exciting players in the NBA. We saw it last year. This team overachieved last year. They were not supposed to be relevant at all. They were probably supposed to be the worst team in the West or the second worst, around there. That's the theme with this team. They overachieved last year. Do we expect them to overachieve again this year? Are they better than teams that are kind of the trendy top teams like the Pelicans, like the Suns? Those are teams that they're going to be fighting for. They have to leap the Blazers. They have to potentially leap the Rockets. It's an uphill battle for them to make it in the playoffs. They could be one of, Zach's team that's the 10th seed in the West that kind of sneaks in the playoffs in the play-in game. That is certainly in play. But it's going to be a tough road for them. It's a tough draw, I would say, for them. Just the fact that they're in the West and where this team is right now to really kind of make noise and compete in the West and be maybe like a 7 or 8 or a 6 seed.
It's going to be a tough draw, or
anyway, the West is loaded.
Yeah, and we move over to Minnesota. I mean, good luck. 28.5 is the team implied total. 19 wins last season, 14th in the conference, 24th offensively, 20th defensively. Played at a high pace, 4th in the NBA. Ricky Rubio back with Minnesota. How do you treat this team from a DFS standpoint? Steph, we'll start with you. Is it just Karl Anthony Towns is the guy that you're going to find yourself paying up for just because the usage rate might be so high?
So Towns is going to go under-owned to start the year. He always goes under-owned, and I'm not really sure why. D'Angelo Russell doesn't really have too much of an impact on Towns' production. Towns is someone I'm really looking to target. I'm curious where his, I'm curious how we're going to look at that kind of opening Towns week and where his ownership goes and if it goes up. Last year he started the season kind of averaging like 70 fantasy points a game. He was just like the number 1 fantasy player, I think, for like the first 3 weeks. He was just like unbelievable. Mm-hmm. I see that path again. I think Towns has that ceiling from a fantasy perspective. I'm not I know he's got his issues as a real NBA basketball player, especially defensively, but strictly fantasy, there's not too many people better than him that produce as well as him. I think D'Angelo Russell actually helps him too. It gives him a better kind of pick and roll threat. Ricky Rubio, I think, also helps him. This is actually a team, and moving away from fantasy really quickly, I think people are a little too low on this team. I think there's a ton of talent here. I think this team's really exciting. I think they're good. They're going to not be good defensively, but defense doesn't matter as much as it used to in the NBA, particularly in the regular season. I like the over on that 28.5. I have them projected for 32 wins. Maybe I'm a little high. I like the talent on this team. They have a lot of pieces that kind of mesh fairly well together.
I feel like across all of the sports, it's easier and there's more value there to pick, a team near the bottom to take the over, as opposed to we're sitting here talking about the Nets and the Lakers and the Clippers getting their over, but everything has to just be so perfect for them. And they could rest some players like we talked about, where the Timberwolves could certainly maybe get to that 30. Zach, how do you treat Cat and Anthony Edwards, first overall pick? What do you expect from him? Oh, we'll just need your mic.
I had to get it one time on the mute. Anthony Edwards, number one pick. I think that's one thing that just kind of, I'm glad I'm not on an island here. I'm glad that Steph said that he's on the over, because I kind of like this team. Not a threat to come out of the West or even win a playoff series, but Karl-Anthony Towns is a really good player. They got D'Angelo Russell in that Wiggins trade. I like Ricky Rubio coming back, and Anthony Edwards. He's not Anthony Bennett. This is a completely different player, and he's going to make an impact for this team this year. I would recommend, if you haven't checked him out yet, preseason game left, tune into that or one of their early season games to watch Anthony Edwards work. And two other guys that they got in the deal from Denver last year, Malik Beasley and Juancho Hernan-Gomez, I think are great rotation pieces, especially Malik Beasley. Some questionable off the court stuff going on with him right now, but on the court, and that's what we're focusing on here, a really good player for them to add to that rotation. So I'm excited to see what this team does this year.
All right. You guys have kind of sold me on the Timberwolves.
This is actually gonna be one of the most fun teams to watch in the NBA, in my opinion. I'm actually I'm probably most excited to watch the Nets, but the T-Wolves are in my top 4, I would say, of teams I'm looking forward to. Well, they're a league pass team. I'll put it that way.
I like watching D'Angelo Russell play too. Like, and he gets into a bit of a groove. He's fun to watch.
He gets a bad rep too, and he's really good. It's not like a hot take at all, but he is a good teammate. He takes some questionable shots, but he also hits those questionable shots. And all of D'Angelo Russell's, I guess, downside that people are worried about, Ricky Rubio is kind of that stabilizer. And I don't want to overhype the T-Wolves here, but I think they're not getting respected enough with that 28.5.
On to the Pelicans, 36.5. This is an interesting team too. I think that they're certainly a fun team to watch. I mean, obviously Zion Williamson in there, but 30-42 last year, 13th in the conference, 15th offensive. I think another team that you just throw at all those numbers. I mean, you forget about them. I mean, number 2 in pace. They bring in Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe. They lose Holiday, as we mentioned in the Eastern Conference show. Favors, they lose Etuan Moore, gone as well. But man, some players on this squad, Steph. What do you expect from Zion? Is there going to be a limitation from him? 24 games last season as a rookie, averaged 22 points, 6 boards, 2 assists, 58% from the field. I mean, this is an exciting player. I'm not breaking any news here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stan Van Gundy is going to unleash Zion. I don't think we're going to see a restricted Zion. I don't think his minutes are going to be restricted. We saw it in the first game of the preseason. Stan Van, just let him go. Don't expect this team to play at the pace they did on their Alvin Gentry. I still think they're going to play fast. Stan Van Gundy teams, I should say, didn't play with a ton of pace, but also teams adapt. Coaches adapt to their team, and with their talent, this team's going to play fast, just not at the second fastest pace in the NBA. I would expect them to be like in that 8 to 10 range. Listen, their backcourt's crowded. From a fan's perspective, I'm not too interested in Eric Bledsoe or Lonzo Ball. I'm very interested in Brandon Ingram and Zion. Zion particularly is going to just dominate the stat sheet. He's going to produce in multiple categories. He's going to pick up more assists than people expect. I think Stan Van Gundy wants to use him as almost like a Ben Simmons-like big, or even like I would say Bam Adebayo is also another comp where he's not actually playing point guard, but he's bringing the ball up and facilitating the offense. Brandon Ingram does the same exact thing. Brandon Ingram's someone I've always been really high on. Even when he was on the Lakers, you can see the ceiling there. He has all the tools to be a perennial all-star. I think he fits really, really well with Zion. And one thing people don't talk about is Brandon Ingram has become a really consistent shooter, and he's a really good shooter. I'd expect that to continue this year. This is a good team. This is a trendy team for people to pick to kind of get into the playoffs in the West. I see the path. I like the Pelicans.
Do you think that they're a playoff team, and do you think, Zach, they could – going up against any of the LA teams in Denver, if they just squeak in, will be super tough. But do you think that they could win a round?
I don't think we're going to see this team get out of the first round this year, but this is my team I think that I would pick to come from the play-in tournament from the 9-10 game and kind of sneak in there and maybe steal a game off one of those teams. I'm not sure. I love Stan Van Gundy. He's one of my favorite coaches. I'm glad he's back on the sideline. And I think Stefano had a pretty great breakdown of this. So I don't have too much to add there. I would also say from a DFS standpoint, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, if you ever have some of those guys in the backcourt sitting out, we can look to him at what should be a cheap price point. And then Jackson Hayes, if you ever get, Steven Adams out and kind of, move him up in the depth chart. Willie Hernan-Gomez behind him too, if things get really dire. And then from a basketball standpoint, I apologize if I missed it, Steph, but JJ Redick is still there. And I really like him as a piece for this team. The last thing I would say is David Griffin as the president of basketball operations there. If there is a competitor for Sam Presti in Oklahoma City in the arms race of assets, it is the New Orleans Pelicans. So this franchise is set up for a really bright future, in my opinion.
I think they are too. Yeah, I'm excited to watch them play. I mean, I think Zion is a freak, so hopefully he can just stay healthy and not rip apart any shoes and just be able to be on the court. And I like Ingram too. I like the call, Steph. He's a guy that I played a lot in DFS too. When at certain points, I mean, he had some big blow up games last season when it was just him, shooting the rock. So I like that call as well. Anybody have OKC in the playoffs last year? They were pretty. No, surprising team, weren't they?
Wasn't me. It wasn't me.
No, I don't think a lot of people did. It wouldn't even be a knock on you guys. 44-28 last year, 5th in the conference, 17th offensive rating, 7th defensive rating. This year, 22.5. Zach, probably going to be a long year for OKC this year.
Yeah, I think, kind of the magic is gone now, right? But I think it's for the better. This team, they made the move last year. Getting Paul George out, bringing in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all those picks and pick swaps that they have the opportunity to make down the road. And GM Sam Presti worked his wizardry again this offseason. This is where the Al Horford contract came, and he got some picks with it and a couple other moves. But from a basketball standpoint, it's going to be a rough year for Oklahoma City, but brighter days are ahead. And from a DFS standpoint, it is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander year. I expect him to maybe be up in the 9K range when all is said and done. He was my most improved player pick on the FTN NBA prediction podcast. And I think the aforementioned Horford might have a little bit of a resurgence fantasy-wise here in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, SGA is certainly interesting. He's got to be a draft target in season-long in leagues for people. I was going to go there and how – I was going to ask how the DFS community would treat this guy and where his price would get to. 9K. I mean, yeah. What's the ceiling for SGA? And this is his team, Steph.
I think his ceiling is what Bradley Beal was for the Wizards last year. He could average 28 points a game, 30 points a game. I think this is the worst team in the NBA. Even though I say they're the worst team in the NBA, this team has a bright future. I want to echo what Zach said. They're doing the right thing. They're doing what the Hornets should be doing. We kind of talked about in the East, They're not going to be good this year. I would take the under in the 22.5. That doesn't mean their future is bad. They're doing all the right things. I think Shai is their building block, and I think the keys to their kingdom are in his hands. I could see Shai in that 27 to 28 points per game. That's on the higher side. I get that maybe is a little bit of a hot take, but who's on this team that's going to shoot and going to score?
This is what I was talking about before. I think it was the East. Sometimes, bad teams, people just avoid them. But, I mean, who's going to score? Who's going to shoot the ball as much as Shai?
And people forget Shai's a pretty good rebounder. He had, a 17 rebound game against the Grizzlies last year. He's going to produce. I wouldn't be surprised if he got in like that 9.5, 10K range, to be honest. I think there is a chance he is consistently – he's going to average 40-plus fantasy points per game this season. As long as the Thunder unleash him, there's a chance, because there are going to be a bad team, that they might play him 30 minutes a game and not 36, 37. And if that's the case, that's going to limit his upside.
And if he gets up to the 9K and he's averaging 40, then he's a top 25 fantasy player. And he's not going as a top 25 fantasy player in season-long format. So I think he's a solid, strong target. I don't think people should reach, but I think if you have him on your team and you leave your drafts with him, I think I think you got a winner there. Phoenix Suns, one of the most improved teams, no question about it. They bring in Chris Paul, Jay Crowder, Langston Galloway, Etuan Moore, a couple just depth pieces there. But last year in the bubble, pretty good, pretty darn good. Did they lose Steph? I don't think they.
No, they did.
Undefeated in the bubble.
They make the playoffs.
Yeah, 38.5 is the win total. 34 and 39 last year. Playoffs this year?
I think so. You have to make. This is the team that. So I don't want to overhype the Suns, because I'm not sure. I'm on the fence. I could see it going both ways, where they're kind of just a 7-8 seed because the West is so competitive. I could also see this team being a 4 seed, which seems crazy, but they have young talent and really good young talent, and they added a piece like Chris Paul. The Thunder were the 5 seed last year with Chris Paul. I'm not the biggest Chris Paul fan, but you can't ignore what he does to a team and how he improves younger players. Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, and Booker especially, is on the path to superstardom. I think Ayton takes a big step this year, especially because of Chris Paul. Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton fit well in the pick and roll, and Chris Paul will unlock kind of DeAndre Ayton's ceiling, and that's exactly what the Suns need. This is a really good team. I like the Jay Crowder signing. I don't think he's going to play much, but shout out to Langston Galloway, St. Joe's, where I went to college with Elliot Christ, actually. So I like the Langston Galloway signing. He's a good shooter. They have the team to contend, not to come out of the West, to contend as like a 6 to 4 seed in the West. They're a team that makes total sense.
I was in Phoenix a couple of years ago for a bachelor party. I went to the Waste Management Open, and I happened to check a Suns game out, and Booker and Ayton didn't play, and they played the Hawks. Luckily, Trae Young went off, and he had a great game. But I was super bummed not to see Booker just jack up 45 plus shots. What do you make of the Suns? I saw you, Zach, when he said top 4 in the West. You kind of went back a little bit. You almost fell off your chair.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, ceiling, yeah, maybe I could give you that, but I think this team is more of like a 7-8 seed this year. Again, it's not to the fault or to the detriment of the talent that this team has amassed over the last 2-3 years, but it's tough out West, man. And a beautiful transition that the alphabetical list of Western Conference teams gave us from OKC to Phoenix, being able to talk about Chris Paul hopefully bringing his magic, from Oklahoma to Arizona. I definitely think this team takes a big step this year. You alluded to the bubble success that we saw, and what a story that was, how fun it was to watch those guys. Certainly not. I don't see this team really getting out of the first round. Probably they'd have to upset a team that, probably one of the LA teams or a Denver, all those teams that we've already talked about being the contenders to come out of the West. So, Coach Monty Williams, I'm a big Monty Williams fan, very deserving of getting that job last year. And we saw what he did. We saw what he did with those guys in the bubble. So it's going to be exciting to watch this team, but I think we need to maybe manage our expectations, especially if you're a Suns fan, because I know, when you get a guy like Chris Paul, the point guard, coming over, it's easy to get overly excited. And Chris, not Chris Meaney, Chris Paul. Let's go no below the belt hits the rest of your career. That's all I ask from you.
What's Ayton's ceiling, and do you think Paul can help him grow as a player? Zach, let's start with you. Like, can he get to? He averaged 18 and 11 last year. Can he average 22, 23, 24 points? Is that too much to ask? With Booker on the team, maybe not.
I don't think it's too much to ask. When I look at DeAndre Ayton, I'm never going to be able to get over him going over Luka Doncic in the NBA draft. But, I digress. I think it's totally plausible. I'm not knocking DeAndre Ayton. I mean, the guy was 18 points, 12 boards, I think 2 assists last year. I think he improves on that this year. Maybe not 23, 24 points a game, but I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with for many years to come.
Yeah, I was at the concession stand at that Phoenix game, and I asked the guy. I said, "Do you wish that the Suns took Luka?" And he was like, "No, you kidding me?" I was like, "Oh, okay, well, you're lost then."
He was lying.
He's in the concession stand. He doesn't watch the games, right? So
Fair enough. We're almost to your Spurs. We got two more before Portland and Sacramento. Trailblazers 41.5. The team implied total 35 and 39 last year, 8th in the conference, 3rd offensive rating, 27th defensive rating. They brought in Robert Covington, pretty good defensive player. I like that addition. Derek Jones and his Cantor, Whiteside, and Trevor Ariza is gone. Zach, we'll start with you. What do you make of this Trailblazers team? I guess it's just as far as the two studs at the guard position will take them.
yeah, and I think you can factor Yusuf Nurkic in there too.
Sure, yeah,
coming back from kind of snapping his leg about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So we saw the impact that he made for them in the bubble, and obviously Dame Lillard is just unreal, and that's gone back many years. So I think the ceiling for this team is breaking into that top four. If things go well for them. You're going to need another big time effort from Dame all year, I think, to have that accomplished. And they're going to need Zach Collins to get healthy and start contributing in a significant way. Carmelo Anthony is going to have to continue to be able to fill it up on nights when some of the other guys don't really have it going. And you mentioned Robert Covington, a good ad for the win, their perimeter defense, and Derek Jones Jr. no slouch either. So, I think the times are going to be good in Portland this year. Great fan base up there, and I enjoy Terry Stotts as a coach. So definitely some upside with this team, but I think limited just by the other juggernauts out west.
Yeah, I like the Nurkic call. He's actually one of my favorites. I kind of forgot about him. Only playing the 8 games last season, but returning in the post, like you mentioned. What do you make of this Trailblazers team, Steph? And do you find yourself always paying up for a guy like Dame because he's a guy that can certainly break the slate?
So I'm going to disagree with Zach a little bit here. I think we kind of flip-flop between the Suns and the Blazers. I'm kind of tired of the Blazers. I don't see the ceiling. I don't see. I mean, this core, we know what this core is. Like, this isn't a surprise. I'm a big fan of Nurkic. I think he is. I mean, he's an incredible fantasy producer. So is Damian Lillard. CJ McCollum has his moments, particularly when Damian Lillard doesn't play. But like, as a basketball team, like, we know what this team is. I'm a big fan of Robert Covington. I think that's a good addition, but I don't think that makes them better than the Suns. Why are the Blazers better than the Pelicans? I don't see it. I think they're my pick to be the victim in the West, where I could see them slip out. I know a lot of people like the Blazers because of Dame, right? And it's hard not to. It's Dame time, right? Like, the man is a walking bucket. He's clutch. I know I'm shaking right now saying I don't think the Blazers are going to make the playoffs because Damian Lillard's probably has somebody watching this and then telling him that I'm saying the Blazers aren't going to make the playoffs, and that's the end of my career in the NBA. But I don't see it. Like, they are what they are. I don't think they're a deep team either. Like, we know what this team is.
You make good points. I don't know if they are better than what we've seen from the past couple of years, but I definitely think that they are a playoff team. I love the Dame. I love the Dame comments.
It's hard not to. I never want to bet against Dame, and that's the thing.
Yeah, he's just such a chip on his shoulder all the time. Yeah, if he ever heard, I mean, he wouldn't.
I think the 41 is high, by the way. I think that's quite high. I mean, the West is really, really tough. And I mean, do you think they're going to be a 5 seed?
Zach does.
Yeah, I mean, I think they could easily get up into that 4 or 5 range. With, again, barring health, we saw with the team, it was a different team once they got Nurkic back in the bubble. And they were missing Trevor Ariza last year, so I think bringing those wing guys in free agency this year was big for them.
Sacramento Kings not going to be a playoff team. I think we can all agree on that. No? Yeah, maybe. 27.5, 31 and 41 last year, 12th in the conference, 18th offensive rating, 19th defensive rating, 21 in pace. They bring in Whiteside. Yeah, there's really not a lot to like here, but I will say that Zach, I think DeAndre Fox is a good player. I think he's a great fantasy player. I think he has room to grow as a player. Am I wrong there in thinking that?
Not at all. I mean, De'Aaron Fox definitely. We have not seen him reach his prime yet. I was not perplexed because the draft pick of Tyrese Halliburton was the correct pick. It was the best player available when they were on the clock. I'm just going to be interested to see how they mesh because I think Halliburton is going to be a starter in this league sooner rather than later. And maybe is he held back from that because of where he got drafted? I think that's, potentially going to come to fruition. But overall, man, the Kings just continue to be a franchise with no direction. And you look at the front court where they have Marvin Bagley, who was the number 2 pick a few years back. Can he stay healthy? You bring in Hassan Whiteside. We talked about him, when we touched on Miami in the Eastern Conference. There's a reason this guy has bounced around for the majority of his career. They've still got Jabari Parker lurking around. But a couple other young guys, Buddy Hield, I think, with the departure of Bogdanovich to the Hawks, I think that's going to open up more usage for him. And maybe Coach Luke Walton gives him a little bit of a longer leash. And then Harrison Barnes, still rightfully kind of coasting off his Golden State days, his championships there in the Bay. Just kind of a steady hand at the 3 for them.
Yeah, Parker's been, he played a couple games with Sacramento last year, I think 4 or 5, but yeah, 5 different teams now in 5 years. He's really bounced around. It's unfortunate. I thought he was going to have a better career than he did. Steph, is there anything more to add here with the Kings that Zac didn't?
No. I'm a fan of De'Aaron Fox. Player. I'm not a fan of the Kings. I said I was tired of the Blazers. I should have stayed there. I'm tired of the Kings. I mean, I don't understand Luke Walton. I don't think he's a very good head coach. For me, there's no reason why this team should be bottom 10 in pace when you have an asset like De'Aaron Fox. I think this team should be running. They don't. This team is what it is. They're gonna be bad.
Zac, you waited long enough, man. 2 hours in for us to finally talk about your San Antonio Spurs. 29.5 the win total, 32 and 39 last year, 11th in the conference, 10th in the offensive rating category, 24th defensively, 15th in pace. Must have been strange for you to see the Spurs not have a winning season.
It is sad, man. And it's not we're all Spurs fans are spoiled.
No
the
doubt.
Whole fan base is spoiled, and we're entering a down period. But I do think there's potential for this team to be lifted kind of out of the lottery a lot sooner than many people think. If you're looking for a franchise that is going to quote unquote do it right, you look to San Antonio, not just in the NBA, but I think across all major American sports. With Pop still there, R.C. Buford in the front office, they have a ton of young guys here. I mean, DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Lonnie Walker, Keldon Johnson. They just drafted Devin Vassell, who I think his first 2 preseason games have been fantastic. I've been surprised by how good he's looked, and they still have DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge hanging around. I mean, really talented, former All-Star veteran guys that, I think we're going to look to at the trade deadline, hopefully move at least one of them, maybe both of them, just for whatever you can get, because both of them are expiring contracts, and then we need to let the young guys play in San Antonio, because if San Antonio doesn't figure out what they have with these guys, they're going to turn into one of these teams we talked about in the East, like a Chicago, that's just jam-packed with young talent, but nobody's emerging as the leader or the so-called star. Because this team's going to probably be in the lottery again next year, and they have a great track record in drafts. So another young guy's coming in right behind them. So it's going to be an interesting season to see how they figure out, who's the guy going forward or who's the core going forward, because Aldridge and DeRozan are on their way out, and there's too many other young guys. They're not going to be able to re-sign them all.
Do you think that DeRozan and Aldridge finish the season in San Antonio, Steph?
I don't know. That's probably a better question for Zac. I don't know. I mean, I agree with Zac. I think, this team is going to do what's right, and they're going to make the right decisions. Zac calls me a homer because I like the Nets. I didn't say the Nets were the best franchise in all major sports. They're not the best franchise.
Winningest team in the last 2 decades. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know. Talk about homerism.
Man, how many times the Mavs run into the Spurs? It's like I was so sick of them for years. But yeah,
he's right, though. I mean, this team's going to do the right thing. They're not going to treat DeMar DeRozan or Marcus Aldridge poorly I think if either of those players want out, they'll find a way to get them out, whether that's a buyout or a trade. It's likely going to be a trade. They probably won't get a ton of assets for either one of them. Just, that's just how the NBA works. But, I like some of their young pieces. I really like Keldon Johnson. My favorite young piece is Dejounte Murray. I think Murray is kind of the next pop. Disciple's the wrong word because it's not his coaching tree, but his next kind of like student, right? And I wanted to see Murray take that step last year, and I think that was a little bit premature by me just because he was still coming off that injury, and he did take steps towards the end of last year. I think we really see it this year. He's becoming an improved shooter. He's looked good in the preseason. I'm a huge fan of Dejounte Murray, and he's someone I would actually overdraft in season-long drafts. I would take him early. I would reach.
Yeah, you know what? I like that call because I think maybe we're a year too early. I agree. I think a lot of people were in on him last year, and they wanted that leap forward. I mean, he did have career highs in all of his numbers. I mean, 10.9 points, 5.8 assists. So, the threes were certainly not there, but I think he has that part. I think he could develop can he develop, Zach? What's the ceiling for Murray in another year with the Spurs here?
I mean, this year the ceiling, I don't know. I just want to see some incremental, improvements from Murray. I think his ceiling in a career is it's tough for guards or wing players to usually get defensive player of the year, but he's already made an all NBA defensive team, as has his backcourt mate Derek White. So, again, at the end of the day, I think you're going to probably have to choose between the two or risk losing them for nothing in free agency. But it's going to be interesting to see those guys develop. And I want to throw in there, just so if it comes to pass, I can brag about it later. And if it doesn't happen, it'll disappear into the YouTube ether. Look out for the Hawks, maybe trading for DeMar DeRozan if they're making that playoff push. I haven't played around with any trade machines yet, but maybe Cam Reddish, a pick, and some salary filler to make it work. That seems like it could be a logical destination for DeMar DeRozan to play out this contract.
I think it makes sense to trade them. I mean, you brought up a good point when you broke them down. I mean, why not? And, let's look to the future here, expiring contracts. Let's move on and try to get something for them. The last team, before we get you guys out of here, and I appreciate you hanging out with me all night. Utah, 42.5, 44-28 last year, 6th in the conference, 9th offensive rating, 13th defensive rating, 26th in pace. You like this Utah team, Steph?
Yeah, I mean, they're the Toronto Raptors of the West, right?
Aren't they? That's a good comparison.
Right? Yeah. Like they're going to keep winning. They have talent. I want to compare them to the Blazers, so to speak, because that's another team that the Blazers are going to have to compete with if they want to be in that top 6 in the West. And I think the Jazz are better. I think Bojan is a legit offensive weapon for this team. I think he fits really well. I want to see a little more from Mike Conley. I know he's getting up there in age, but I think Mike Conley's still a really good point guard, and he's kind of more your traditional point guard. And the big guy is Donovan Mitchell, right? Is he going to take that leap to superstardom? We kind of saw it in the bubble, particularly in that Denver series. It's just the ceiling for him is an MVP candidate. And I don't think that's it this season. I don't think he's in the conversation. And but he's still a young player. And I think that's what the Jazz envision. They want to build around Donovan Mitchell. I was going to say Dejounte Murray. I was like, wait, he's not on the Jazz. But I mean, this team is going to win games. I don't think they're going to make it out of the West. I think the Nuggets are better. Some people might view this team as a sneaky pick to come out of the West. I don't see it. I do think they are a 5 seed. I think that's fair. And they're gonna be good. That's kind of the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, they're competitive. They're a playoff team. I don't think they have what it takes to take some of those 3 or 4 top teams in the West to eliminate them and move on. But what we saw from Mitchell in the bubble, in the 7 playoff games, averaged 36 points per game. He really took his game to the next level. Is he the key, Zach? Is it him, or do they need 1 or 2 other pieces like a Gobert or somebody else to take that leap forward for them to actually knock off an LA team?
Yeah, I think it's more than 1 or 2 pieces that this Utah team needs to take that step. And we talked about how history remembers the winners. Let's not forget, because it was only 3 months ago, this team was an in and out, a desperation 3 from Mike Conley away from knocking off the Nuggets in Game 7. Yeah, and then we don't have that Nuggets story, and maybe our outlook on the Jazz is different. But just kind of looking at their situation, you've got, an older Mike Conley, still a very good player, coming up on an expiring deal. Same with Rudy Gobert. I think this team looks very different in the years to come. And, it's hard to say do or die for a team that you don't really consider a championship contender. Getting Bojan Bogdanovic back from injury is going to be big for this team because he provides some scoring punch off the wing, especially when Mitchell doesn't have it going. The ceiling is just capped on this team for me, especially I think even if they were in the East, I wouldn't consider them really a contender. I think they were kind of overhyped coming into last season, and maybe some people sleep on them this year, but sleep on them for what? I don't know.
Yeah, it's fair. All right, let's recap. We'll stick with you, Zach. Who's coming out of the West? Give me your top 3 and maybe a dark horse to maybe finish top 5 or something.
Yeah, so my top 3 in terms of seeding is going to be Clippers, Nuggets, Lakers. I think we talked about the Lakers maybe having some rest days. LeBron's talked about how he doesn't really need to gear up, and he's right. He doesn't need to be playing full minutes. That team needs to be playing their best basketball when the playoffs roll around. I've got the Clippers coming out of the Western Conference. Again, we talked about that when we went over the Clippers, and I mentioned the Nuggets as a dark horse, so I'll mention another one. Mavericks. Kristaps Porzingis is healthy. They competed with the Clippers. There was no gimme games for the Clippers in that series, and Kristaps Porzingis went down early in that series. So you add him to the mix, they can compete with anybody. So that would be my true dark horse is the Mavericks.
I thought that they were completely finished when they lost Kristaps, and they didn't look finished. They hung around like we talked about earlier. Steph, finish strong here, buddy.
I would go. I'm pretty similar with Zach here. I would go Clippers, Nuggets, Lakers. I think the Lakers are going to kind of start the year really slow, and I kind of mentioned with like the Nets in the East, they're going to lose a couple games early. They're not going to really kind of give it their all, so to speak, in the first month of the season, and that's going to affect them in a year where home court advantage, I should say, doesn't really matter too much. I think they're okay being the 3 seed. So I would go Clippers, Nuggets, Lakers. My dark horse, and I don't really think there's a dark horse in the West. I think it's going to be the Lakers or the Clippers. My dark horse would be the Warriors. I think people are a little too low on them. This team is really good. Steph Curry is a top 10 player in the NBA, even though, he might not have the physique as some of those other top 10 players in the NBA. He's literally changed the game. And he's looked good in the preseason. He looked good, really good yesterday. I think the Warriors are a team that could surprise people. They're not my pick to make it out. My pick would be the Lakers. I think we get a Nets Lakers finals.
Oh, baby.
Is that the toughest division in basketball?
Yes.
Clippers, Lakers, Warriors, Suns, and then you've got the Kings at the bottom. But that's tough, man. If you take an injury, you can drop really fast because of the condensed schedule, right? You're playing your division more than anybody else. Yep. And outside of the Atlantic with your Nets, Steph, with, Nets, Celtics, Sixers, Raptors, I don't think that measures up to what the Pacific Division is bringing.
Yeah, those are the two. Yeah, in my opinion, those are the 2 best divisions in basketball, Atlantic and Pacific. And the edge would have to go with the Pacific with the offseason moves from Phoenix and maybe Curry being able to stay healthy all year. Just like the Spurs back in the day with the championship hangover. This is what we're saying. The Lakers they're going to have a championship hangover, but they're still going to be just fine as a 3rd seed at worst, I guess, in the Western Conference.
Going through the West right now, it's loaded.
It always is, right? We could go back in years when Phoenix and the Mavs were above 500, not making the playoffs. One of the 2 missing out, and look over at the Eastern Conference and you see the 7th and 8th seed being under 500 and making the playoffs. It's been like that for a long time, I feel like. A pleasure, guys. This was awesome. I appreciate you guys jumping on. Both of these guys you need to follow at Big Money Play, at Kwisenberg DFS. Join us at FTN. I promise you won't regret it. We're going to be doing lots of great DFS content. Some DFS shows, and Steph, maybe you and I don't know. I was going to bring it up off the top, but maybe hung along this week.
There's some eye emojis going on.
Some eye emojis. Steph and I may be hooking up with some DFS content, but I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Follow those guys. Again, any questions, they're awesome on Twitter. They'll interact with you. And if you have a question you're watching on YouTube, just leave it there and we'll get to it. So good luck in your drafts and enjoy the NBA season. And we'll be back. We'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.